Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Phillips. This is my little lecture for week 4 to proceed your reading on Plato's Apology. Because the Canvas application is so awful when it comes to uploading videos, I'm uploading these, as you know, on my YouTube channel instead. So for this particular one, I have to say that it's because anybody can go to this. I just have to say this is copyrighted stuff. If anybody ever wants to replicate it, they have to ask my permission, because this is stuff I'm writing that actually deals with what we're exploring this week on Plato's Apology, and it's copyrighted by yours truly. I would never say something like that. It must seem a little wacky to say something like that, except this is on my public YouTube channel because the Canvas application, which is supposed to allow me to directly upload stuff, is awful. Even after I try to upload things for 1-2 hours, it never lets me. So, okay, enough about that. All right, so Socrates' Apology. In my view, no piece of literature is as stirring as the Socrates of Plato's Apology. Here was a human who did it his way, through days of glory, and just as much so through days of opprobrium and scapegoating during the time of Athens' decline, when he was accused of impiety and for corrupting the youth of Athens. Socrates still strove more than ever to realize an exalted type of excellent life for one and all. I was moved, starting at a really tender age, by what is widely considered Socrates' most memorable assertion in the Apology, that, quote-unquote, the unexamined life is not worth living. On the other hand, I think I was around 9 at the time I read that. It seemed kind of a no-brainer. What child of my age at that time doesn't have it in her DNA to examine without cease life in all of its dimensions, right? But what struck me most in this real-life drama of Plato's capturing Socrates' final hours was the septuagenarian's insistence to those present with him at the end that they should, quote-unquote, understand that I shall never alter my ways, not even if I have to die many times. So Socrates was asserting so much more than that celebrated platitude that the unexamined life is not worth living. What he's saying, his revolutionary declaration, was the examined life is worth dying for. That's powerful stuff. And he did die. But examining his life till the very end. And you'll read about all of this in the very short Apology. I hope some of you are compelled to read it more than once. But behold in Socrates, read this thing, a human bundled into this very unhandsome exterior, a pug-nosed guy with a really lousy beard and a questionable taste in clothing, and in some of his company. He was a human who was not to be deterred or derailed in his quest for honest insight into how to achieve human excellence in all its dimensions. He was a man filled with joy, a kind of joy that emerges on the other side of agony and betrayal and despair. And he was free of resentment. The closest Socrates came to a lament of the horrific injustice of the orchestration of his death sentence was just to say, in another world, they do not put a man to death for asking questions, assuredly not. But even he said that without bitterness or the self-pity or the maudlin sort, for instance, of Job of the New Testament. And so instead of asking, why me, in sort of woe is me, Job-like fashion, Socrates said, well, why not me? It could happen to anybody. In this spirit, he was bound and determined, especially on the cusp of ending his life, to chart new beginnings for those he left behind. And so his actions at the end have spoken to many of us across the centuries and across cultures and ages. He was the real deal. An unstoppable force of human nature, and you see that nowhere more than you do in the Apology. He wasn't more than human. He was a living, breathing example of how to go about living and dying that serves as a beacon, as well as a cautionary tale of how little many humans settle for during their mortal moment. But he was spirit personified, not spiritual, but spirit filled, of the sort of which the Hellenic Greek concept, that word arete, the quest to become an excellent all-arounder in all facets of life, is brewed and realized. I mean, nothing could break the guy. And then I also write that that Socrates, was really guided in his actions by what's called a daemon. In the Apology, it's some of you could it can be translated many ways. There's no, as with so many Greek terms that are not translated well, they're translated into the English language like they just want to find a one-on-word word for these things. It can mean many things, but it can be a voice, a conscience, a spirit, your guide, so to speak, your inner guide, many different things. But in the Apology, Socrates characterizes his daemon as the voice that tells him not what to do, but what not to do. He says, "You have often heard me speak of an oracle or sign which comes to me and is the divinity. This sign I've had ever since I was a child. The sign is a voice which comes to me and always forbids me to do something which I'm going to do, but never commands me to do anything." So and so Socrates says in the Apology that that's how the daemon works with him. It doesn't tell him what to do, but marks off or demarcates what's not to do. And I find that absolutely fascinating. He says so many more things. He questions whether there will be another world or life to go to. Either way, he feels that he has lived this life as fully as he can. He's like the Old Testament prophets. He refuses to cry peace, peace when there is no peace, and he insists on asking the hard and tough questions. And he says at the end, what man would not give to converse with, what would not a man give to converse with Orpheus and Musaeus and Hesiod and Homer? If this be true, let me die again and again. So he's hoping maybe there's lots and lots of afterlives. If the end result is that he gets to meet yet again so many famous movers and shakers and thinkers and do-gooders in the worlds to come. But in the Apology, he says his goodbyes. He encourages those with him who are very sad to keep following that path of inquiry, as he did all of his life, to carry that torch. And he says his goodbyes without regrets. He says, "The hour of departure has arrived, and we go our separate ways. I to die and you to live. Which of these two is better, only God knows." It's really something. So think about all these things. Think about this extraordinary human being, the real flesh and blood human being, who decided that even when he was given the chance to go into exile rather than be executed, he decided it was better to stay put and be that person that he was until the end. And I'm tempted to say until the bitter end, except for he wasn't bitter. His wasn't just a philosophy of forgiveness, but it was almost what I would call non-forgiveness. Forgiveness was beside the point. This is what happened, and he was just who he was till the end. And it's so important, and especially if you're going to succeed to the fullest in this class, to begin making distinctions and understanding differences between personal autonomy and human freedom. Above and beyond any Google searches that you do that distinguishes these things, and above and beyond the text that we're reading and what we've talked about, this idea that it can be in the most constricting circumstances, when there's very few moves that you can take, when your freedoms are extraordinarily limited, that you might nonetheless have the most governance over yourself, the most personal autonomy. It's when you have few choices, perhaps, that's when personal autonomy really comes to bear, and you decide, well, how am I going to govern myself and my actions in these moments? Am I going to, in ways, depending on those actions, you might set an example for how we might free ourselves and set ourselves free and liberate our spirit and the minds and hearts of others by our example of how we behave in the most horrifically constricting of circumstances, dehumanizing and degrading of circumstances. That's maybe when some great folks like Socrates are most put to the test, and the example that they set is what resonates ages still, especially in certain times when maybe it is time for others to stand up and be counted too. To speak truths that are uncomfortable. Again, not to cry peace, peace when there is no peace, no more than Jeremiah or Ezekiel would in the New Testament. Those extraordinary prophets as well. But so think about differences of kind, differences of degree, kinds of human autonomy, kinds of human freedoms, degrees of human autonomy and freedom, and which are most prone to set a soul free and to maybe liberate our own imaginations and think about new possibilities. Every time I read Antigone, with just a little bit, it gives me a little bit more imaginative vision to think about the types of personas that we need today if we're going to chart a promising course. At times, society can be at crossroads and precipices on many occasions. Sometimes we're just so blind we don't even know it until there has been a pretty deep decline. But we can nonetheless be ultimate optimists too and have faith in human beings to do the right thing, whatever they conceive that to be, but mostly by setting a personal example of personal autonomy, especially in the most constricting circumstances. So I think it's important to give some considerable thought to these things as we continue to unfold this class, the great readings that we have that I'm enjoying tremendously going over them again. But I hope you really dig in with Plato's Apology, the last hours of Socrates, and think these things through for yourself, not to come up with Dr. Phillips's answers or insights or anything, but in your own age and time and climate and experiences and what you're going through right now. What are your own thoughts about him? You might have a completely different take on him, and that's totally to the good, and I look forward to hearing about that. And I look forward very much to the questions that will be posed and the discussion. I've been enjoying the discussion. This last one was the richest we've had yet. I would like to take more of a back seat, even though I really enjoy participating, and I love responding to various comments because it helps push my own thinking. The idea is that you also do that among yourselves, with the facilitators who are assigned for each given week to take on more and more of that role. And so I've been trying to model that a little bit since we've only had 2 of these so far. And I look forward to this one in particular. Okay, that's enough. Have a good weekend. I'll send you the link to this by announcement. I probably won't keep this up on my public YouTube page that long, maybe just for a week. It's a pity that I just can't upload it on Canvas. I've just lost way too much time trying to. But and you said that if I set it on private setting on YouTube that you can't access it. So I'll just keep it on public setting for about a week. But some of these things are things that I'm writing and pondering about right now for a book that I'm writing. But this particular reading came at the perfect time because these things that I read to you just now are some writings that I've done just in the last couple days. And so it was really beneficial to me to go over this particular work of Socrates that was thrust on me when I was way too young, but that I still find so much enjoyment with. So have a good Labor Day weekend and write to me. As you all know by now, anybody who's contacted me, I'm readily available. Talk with you by video, do anything to make your lives less stressful, to answer any questions. So you can do very conscientious, creative work that makes connections and important distinctions among things, and that furthers our thinking about this amazing theme of human freedom and autonomy. Thanks a lot.